All right, so this is Baker and Molasses at the Movies. We're doing a special edition today. Gus and I don't go out to animated movies too often because he's a double income, no kids. I'm a single income empty nester, so we don't do the animation. So we got a special guest, Zach Johnson, who I'll introduce in just a second. I just want to mention that Dan DeBecky Trio is playing at JR's Packing House on December 18th. It's a special Christmas show, and they're doing the Charlie Brown Christmas music, and I think that sounds really fun at 6 to 9 at JR's Packing House. I just wanted to put that out there. So, Zach Johnson, welcome.
Mm-hmm. Hello. Thank you for having me.
And
I'm the perfect one to have to talk about an animated film because you mentioned your single income empty nester. I'm a divorced dad with 2 kids of 6 and 3. So
all right.
They went with me to see Frozen 2.
All right. Well, that's excellent.
They couldn't be here today.
Okay. I'd love to know their opinions. Yeah. You can tell me what they are. Yeah. But so tell me a little bit about yourself. So you're a guitarist. Why don't you just?
Yeah, I'm a classical guitarist and classical musician by trade. I've got my doctorate in classical guitar performance.
Oh, wow.
But I always had an appreciation for film. I started, I would say, my family was always been film nuts. Like, even when I was a kid, my mother was we were always watching classic films, like the Frank Capra sort of classic films, even like a lot of Jimmy Stewart.
Sure.
We loved a lot of Hitchcock. I remember one of the first movies I really remember sort of as a kid, I was probably like 7 or 8, was a Hitchcock film called The Trouble with Harry, or The Problem with Harry, where the kid finds a dead body.
Oh, wow.
But it's not a scary Hitchcock at all. It was, and then that along, and then Rear Window after that, and like those were, it's like the first time where it's like, oh, film.
Yeah.
And then I always, I wouldn't say I was like a pretentious 8-year-old or something, but some people might argue about that. But then I remember growing up, like then it was really like my aunt kind of really got me into like cinema and film, because she was a huge film buff, and she was like the classic sort of, when Turner Classic Movies came out, when that channel came on, she was just like in heaven, and she was recording everything, and so she was showing me like all these great classic films, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, and Rebecca, another Hitchcock film, oddly enough, like all of these great films. And then I remember one of the first moments when I was like, the real like boom moment of like something film could do is I remember her showing me this one clip from Akira Kurosawa's last film called Dreams. Yeah. And it was the one where Martin Scorsese is the actor in it. It's a bunch of vignettes, but the vignette was where he wakes up in a Van Gogh film, or in a Van Gogh painting.
Yes, I saw that.
Yeah, and I was like, the imagery of that, and I was just like, what is this? And that was a real like watershed moment.
Yeah, thanks for reminding me of that. Yeah. Wow.
And then I remember, and then the big year for me was the year of 1999. I feel like that was like one of the best year. That was 20 years ago, but like that year, like I was about 16, 17, so I could drive. I was driving to the movies. I remember I was going to Burns Court a lot. So by then I had become a very pretentious 16-year-old. But so I was driving to the movies, and I remember that was Being John Malkovich came out that year. American Beauty came out that year. The Sixth Sense, before M. Night Shyamalan became what he is now. Yeah. With The Green Mile, Frank Darabont has always been one of I feel like a really underrated director. But so that's like, being a blossoming cinephile, quote unquote, like that year of just going to the movies, and it's just like hit after hit after hit after hit, like really not in like popular films, but like really great artistic films too. Like, so I feel like that was a big thing for me. And then like when I got to college, like being with a bunch of classical musicians, like we're all pretty pretentious, but like me and my roommate, we were just like peas in a pod.
Oh, cool.
And like we both fell down the rabbit hole of Akira Kurosawa, Yasuhiro Ozu, Fellini, Jacques Demy, like great European masters, Truffaut and Renoir. Like we're just insufferable.
Right.
We're slightly less insufferable now, but still pretty bad. But back then we were terrible. But we really just like soaked it up. Like we were just total cultural dweebs and like just living with classical music and then film too. And I feel like that's where my love for cinema kind of the blossoming and then the like sort of real world, because I'm not versed in film, but I've studied it like autodidactically.
Oh yeah, and in fact, some of the best filmmakers didn't go to school for it.
Right, exactly. Yeah, Quentin Tarantino just worked. He just watched a bunch of films and liked them. Like, yeah.
Right. Was he the one who I think went to NYU? I could be thinking of someone else, but then dropped out, and only because they basically would go see films instead of going to class. But I think that's someone else.
I think Quentin Tarantino famously never went to university.
So you don't, it's not a necessity.
No, I'm thinking Damien Chazelle went to Harvard. I know who you're talking about, but I can't now. I'm like,
well, the best
totally
education
blanking.
Is experience.
Maybe
anyway.
it might be Noah Baumbach or somebody.
I think it might be.
Which I would like to talk about him later. But then we're jumping ahead.
All right. Well, you mentioned Jacques Demy, so real quick, I'll just give a shout out to Gus Molasses, who does a Q&A, and he's doing Umbrellas of Cherbourg. Am I saying it correctly?
Yes, yeah. If you want to be super pretentious.
Okay, please. I want to be.
So it's La Papeterie de Cherbourg by Jacques Demy. But it's the Umbrellas of Cherbourg by Jacques Demy, a great 50s, 60s, sort of came out of the French New Wave, but in a much more popular, not as dour as Truffaut.
Right.
But I mean, this movie, I remember I studied this film. I saw it first in a class I was taking in my master's degree called Modern Opera. And then all of a sudden we're watching this movie and I was like, why are we studying this? But if you watch it, it is an opera. It's a film opera. It is completely sung through. Yes. There is no spoken dialogue. The music is by the great French jazz master, Michel Legrand. And it has one of the famous tune in it is "I Will Remember You," which was covered by, most famously, Frank Sinatra covered it. But like the music is just to die for. The imagery is so bright and vibrant. I mean, and if you like La La Land, you're gonna love this movie because like La La Land, like Damien Chazelle totally talks about how much he loves the movies of Jacques Demy, and that's what he was paying homage to with La La Land. And you can just see it with the camera movement, the color palette, everything. So to see it on a big screen, like you don't miss it.
6 p.m. Saturday, 500 Televast Road. Definitely a great place to be. Okay, so now we're going to go to Frozen 2. I feel like we just took an escalator down. But all right.
I would argue not so much.
All right, good. Yeah. Here's what I know about Frozen. Okay. All right. I know Frozen, the first, was huge. Obviously, I only have one son, so we did all the comic book movies, and so I was never hip to any of the Little Mermaids, none of that. But Frozen was like such a huge hit. Frozen 2, I've heard, wasn't as great. It's hard to do something the second time around and make it as good. But so give me your...
Well, I think right now, so Frozen 2 is a gigantic hit, though. It's actually outpacing the first one at the box office. And so first, I feel like you have to go to the nature of sequels. And whenever you have a sequel, you first have to answer the question, does this sequel merit its right to exist? And I totally 100% think this movie does. Okay. I mean, the way it fills in and progresses the story and sort of expands the world that was created in the first one, I thought it was fantastic. And I'll say where I think in terms of the overall story and everything that comes out of it it's better than the first one. And visually, what happens with it, the leaps they've made in the 5 years or so since the first film came out is just sort of exponential. And this is visually just beautiful to watch. And the story is so engaging. Where it lacks behind the first movie, if you ask me, is the songs. Because the songs actually was, again, as I mentioned, I have a 6 and a 3-year-old. So they went with me, and this movie is about an hour and 40 minutes Plus, there were 25 minutes of previews.
Oh, that's
before
the worst.
So we're talking like 2 hours and 10 minutes, and me and my kids were there the whole time,
Right.
and they were like enraptured by this film the whole time. And I've taken them to other films, and they, after about an hour, they get real squirmy. They were in it to win it with this film. I mean, they were held.
Are they both girls? I'm just curious.
No,
Or
one's a
doesn't it
girl,
matter?
one's yeah.
Okay,
So my
okay.
6-year-old is my daughter, and my 3-year-old is my son.
Okay.
But they were both just like, whoa! Like even though my 3-year-old had one little moment where he just kind of asked, he's like, how much longer? And I was like, we only got about 15 minutes.
Right.
Like he made it, and that was it. That was the only time. Like,
Right.
and that was it. They were just, and they walked out of there both being like, I loved it. Like so it gets the 3 and a 6-year-old, but also gets the 37-year-old's vote of approval because
good.
the only thing funny though is the songs. The songs are so great in the first one, and all of these are like I can barely remember a note.
Right.
There's the one big one which is Into the Unknown, which I have to say, if like for those of you who have kids and got tired of your toddler trying to belt out Let It Go, like just wait till your tuneless toddler tries to barrel this one out, because this is like a total showcase for Idina Menzel, and that's my only quibble with it, but I just thought it was great. I mean, like really do, and yeah, I would highly recommend it if you like animated films.
Right.
Even if you don't like animated films, I think
I
you'd
agree.
like it, but some people just have that mental block, but
Yeah. Okay,
I would say it's definitely worth it, especially if you have family. Everyone's going to love it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I listened to this podcast called Film Week, and they talked about the movie. They did say, piggybacking on what you said, that it does stuff in animation they had never seen before.
Yeah.
So it is definitely profound.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then they were a mixed bag as far as their opinion. There were 4 people speaking. They didn't like what Olaf has turned into. They said something about an idiot savant. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, and that's. I feel like Olaf is the weak link in both films. Yeah, I mean, he's kind of like just venturing into like Jar Jar Binks land of like, what are you doing
That
here?
was my end of Star Wars.
Yeah,
by the
like
way.
yeah, and it's like the problem is like he's
Is it comic relief? Is that what he's supposed to be?
well, he's sort of like comic relief, and then it's like, but he also gets sort of like shoehorned into the story, but there's like a lack of like activity or will, like true like activeness in it. It's just like stumbling into this thing, as opposed to like, to go to Star Wars, like the Ewoks have agency.
Right.
They demonstrated agency, and they go to war against the Empire, whereas Jar Jar Binks is sort of like I don't know, like a Jerry Lewis character that's like, and then all of a sudden like helps to blow up a Death Star or something. It's just like, and Olaf is kind of not fully there, but like he's very ancillary. But I feel like he gets a little he gets tamped down a little bit in this film, but there's still there is that level to it. But I don't know. It didn't bother me as much as I thought.
Yeah, and I mean, sometimes these reviewers can be way too tough.
Right. And I mean, yeah, I understand that point of view, but I think he's less that than he was in the first film, in this one. So.
Now, when you choose films for your kids, do you think... I mean, do you worry? I didn't, as a parent, so trust me. But, I mean, of course I did when it got to be R-rated movies later on in life. But do you worry about the messages it's sending or anything like that? Like, one of the reviewers mentioned something about his 6-year-old daughter was asking him questions, and he thought the movie, whatever the question was, he didn't actually say what the question was, but he was angry at the movie because he didn't think it sent a good message. And I think it had to do with something with the girl that's being proposed to. I don't know. So again, maybe people look too far deep into this.
Gosh, I'm trying to...
Instead of just enjoying it. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes, to quote Sigmund Freud, sometimes a cigar is just a cigar.
Right.
I'm trying to even think. There's no... Oh, yeah. I think this guy's bringing his own
Okay, yeah, okay.
baggage
And
to it. I mean, I would say if there's anything, my quibble would be with the Christoph character, who is like, all his story is he's trying to find the perfect moment to propose to Anna.
Right.
And I'm not giving anything away here, really, but it's
Right.
like,